All right, welcome to Module 3 for NR567. We have provided some overview, and these slides will be a little bit more of an overview, but starting to really dive down into some of the nuts and bolts of NEPA and how NEPA is implemented um, with federal actions. So Section 101, of the regulation is a declaration, and really just a signal of awareness of the public that we talked about in our early slides of kind of this of this movement. Really, I mean, a profound signal by society that there was acknowledgement, of human impact on Earth, which can't really be understated. And then Section 2, which will or 102, which we'll just dive down a little deeper, commits the federal government to analyzing and mitigating against these environmental impacts before approving a proposed action, and applies to all federal agencies. Um, we specifically talk a lot about the Forest Service in this course. A lot of the instructors and myself have a lot of experience with the Forest Service, which makes sense, but also a majority of NEPA documents that are prepared by the Forest Service. They prepare far more than any other of the federal agencies like the FAA, Army Corps of Engineers, agencies like that. So there's two primary aims. So the federal agency, must consider environmental impacts of a proposal before taking action, and also that federal agencies must inform the public, which we'll get into a little bit more here in the next upcoming slides, of the proposed action and the environmental concerns associated with the proposal. So as far as governance goes of the Council of Environmental Quality, or the CEQ. So Section 202 establishes by the Executive Office of the President the Council of Environmental Quality. And so if you look at page 5 of the original act, the council is composed of 3 members appointed by the President with the advice and consent of the Senate. So one of the members is designated by the President as the chairman. And as defined here, they need to be a reputable source to identify trends and be familiar with a wide array of interests of our nation, and be able to recommend policies to promote the improvement of the quality of our environment. And so some of the duties of the CEQ, are to assist and advise the President on environmental matters, gather, analyze, interpret information concerning the quality of environment, review and appraise federal government programs and activities, develop and recommend to the President national policies to improve environmental quality, conduct investigations and analyses relating to ecological systems and environmental quality, document changes in the national environment, and report to the President on all of these things. So they furnish studies, reports, and make suggestions. So they're the experts as far as the President of the office is concerned with how the CEQ was initially intended. So this next slide is a list of CEQ regulations that are the standards that have been set for all federal agencies. So this is an index. If you go to the CEQ website, this will come up, and we will have links to each of these regulations that oversee the implementation of NEPA if you want to check that out. So again, we come back to this point of NEPA is action forcing. It mandates action and procedures that must be taken before a decision can be made about a project. These bullet points provide an overview of what NEPA will provide. So an agency must produce documents prior to a decision. So they must disclose the environmental impacts of a proposed action, unavoidable adverse environmental impacts, alternative to the proposed solution, relationship between the short-term use and the long-term productivity, and the irreversible and irretrievable commitment of resources, which sometimes is resources that are not renewable. So NEPA, as we've repeated again, is about procedure. It's agency NEPA decisions have to be rigorous and objective. Citizen involvement has to occur within agency decisions, or has to be involved. Um, Other agencies and governments involved that may intersect with the project also have to be involved with the agency's decisions. If the scale of the project covers multiple agencies, like it could be something that happens with the Army Corps of Engineers and the Forest Service, or the FAA and the Forest Service, then all the agencies that have interest in the project have to be involved. And then, as we talked about in the last lecture, they're subject to court review and scrutiny. So when do you know when NEPA needs to be launched? And ambiguity can be a problem here. These questions can have some subjective interpretations. When exactly does a NEPA and an EIS apply? There's proposals for major. This is the wording: proposals for major federal actions significantly affecting the quality of the human environment. But what is a major federal action? And what does significantly um, affect mean? Is a prescription burn on 250 acres a significant impact? Remodeling a ranger's district station. These are decisions that federal agencies are faced with and need guidance on. So, as we talked about, NEPA is an action forcing policy, and so the first step is to make a decision, or make a project available for the public by publishing in the Federal Register a notice of intent. And so this can be a wide variety of things. Here's some examples of of things that took place in Colorado. So just to give you an idea of the kind of the variability of what can be considered a project or a program. So it can be like entirely or partially financed or assisted, conducted, regulated, or approved by a federal agency. So there's an example with DIA being financed in part by the Department of Transportation, which required the NEPA process, and some other things. So when something is deemed significant, it can have varying levels of significance at different regional levels, and so it depends on the local, regional, and national perspectives, which as you get larger involves a larger amount of stakeholders. So, the context of significance, and so there's a difference. Like a wildland fire, in the backcountry of southeastern Wyoming is going to significantly impact the environment in different ways. Maybe have less of a impact on humans compared to like some kind of wildland fire use in the Front Range of Colorado, where it's intersecting more with an urban area, as opposed to something that may not have the same level of significance, even though they could be relatively the same projects. So here's some variables that can vary across projects and have different geographic characteristics and things that you can think about um, as we move forward into more of the actual format of these documents. So what are the effects? And so we can break it down into direct effects, indirect effects, and cumulative effects. And so direct effects, immediate and measurable impact on the environment. I particularly worked on the economic section of impact, which a lot of times people don't think about. But direct effects, if there's going to be a project, generally there's more jobs, and so that must be disclosed as an effect to the environment. So indirect effects, so a delayed environmental impact or not immediately measurable on the site. Say there's a burn or there's some kind of exhaust from a project. If it's going to be like some sort of extractive project or things like that, you're going to have exhaust going into the air. You're going to have particulate matter going into the air. So how is that going to affect someone else, not directly but indirectly? Maybe some health impacts. And then cumulative effects, so the impacts of an action when added to the past, present, and foreseeable future actions, regardless of who is taking those actions. So this additive effect that can happen over time. So the NEPA action forcing threshold. So the quality of the human environment. So what is the human environment? How do we define that? We have natural environment, the built environment, human health, economic, social, and psychological impacts. Which this is one that I was talking about that I specifically worked on, was more of the economic and more of the social impacts, which is considered part of the human environment. And so, what if you're not sure? We can think about the possibility of an impact. What if you're not sure the proposed action crosses the NEPA threshold of a significant impact? And these are things to start thinking about yourself as we move forward into the class when you're thinking about proposed actions. So we can conduct an environmental assessment to analyze the potential, as we've talked about, the proposed action, and then provide evidence, that's litigation proof, is what we'll talk a little bit about more too. When you come to the conclusion that there's a finding of no significant impact or a FONSI, or determine that an EIS is actually needed. So this is kind of showing a metric and kind of the level of impact, and think about this subjective term of significance a lot of times, and so this is just looking at it on a more of a somewhat of a metric scale. So this is the last slide, and you can have a look at this of kind of the iterative thinking and actions outlined when thinking about impacts, and whether or not whether an EA dictates the necessity to move forward with an EIS, which we'll start to dive into more of the internal mechanics of those in the next lecture.